Hey, this is Chef Dave Martin. You're listening to Shawn Rosler on the Coarse Grind Podcast. Let's eat.
Toujours prêt à tout recommencer, replonger, se ressourcer, lutter pour se retrouver.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is episode number 43 of the Coarse Grind Podcast. With you as always, Shawn Rosler, host, creator. How the hell are you doing? Hey, sometimes on this show, I tend to get a little streaky, a little trend-based, if you will. It doesn't mean it's trendy, I just mean I tend to trend. So, like, if I do one brewery, I'll sneak one or two in after it. If I do a Top Chef contestant, I'll try to pile all I can into a string of, like, three, 4, 5 episodes. And apparently, whenever I do an interview with a fisherman, aquaculturist to be precise, I have to follow up with another one, and one with the same first name. Weird, huh? So, a local business that makes fresh frozen wild Alaskan sockeye salmon available to you at a common good price. Tonight's guest is co-owner and operator of Wild for Salmon in our dear old Bloomsburg, PA. They provide you with the highest quality flash frozen Alaskan sockeye available, and I know this as we just recently prepared it courtesy of a Christopher Kimball, America's Test Kitchen recipe. Yes, I'm still going on about that. Wild for Salmon began as only an adventurous trip to Alaska in 2002 to do some commercial salmon fishing with a friend. Following their first fishing excursion, tonight's guest and his wife arrived home with 2 coolers full of salmon for friends and family. This is when they quickly realized the uniqueness of the product and the possibilities that lied ahead. They've since grown to serve individuals, buying clubs, local farm markets, restaurants, and health food stores. They're able to experience the beauty of Alaska and participate in the native culture of the land, and as the demand increases for wild salmon and omega-3 rich diets, our guest is all too proud to be able to make this product available to you at an affordable cost. Wild for Salmon is delighted to be able to supply its consumers with the best sockeye salmon in the world, and this podcast host is delighted to have tonight's guest on to learn all about it. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, my guest this evening, co-owner-operator of Wild for Salmon right here in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, Mr. Steve Kurian. Steve Kurian, welcome to the program. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm great. Thanks, Shawn.
Awesome. Thanks for being on. I know you're busy, so we want to take advantage of the time that we have. We'll make it as quick and painless as possible. No one's died in the interview yet, so I'm hoping that remains the same here today. Listeners, for those of you with terrible short-term memories, or for those of you new to the program, starters, mains, and afters. Starters is where the guest in question comes from. Mains, where they're at. And afters, a little bit more off the cuff, a little bit more fun. Should be a good time. So without further ado, Steve, tell me about where and what you grew up eating.
We grew up eating a lot of pork, chicken, all that kind of farm-raised products that we grew, and we had a custom butcher shop in our backyard, so we spent a lot of times butchering during the day and eating that for lunch, dinner, and everything between.
That's awesome. So you grew up on a farm then?
Yeah, small farm, and we butchered chickens, pigs, cows, all that, all the animals.
That's awesome. And would you say, as a young one coming up, were you a picky eater?
Oh, absolutely not.
No? That's awesome. And I imagine, too, being in the farm culture, you really don't have much room to be picky.
No, I don't think so. And I think if you're brought up in that kind of atmosphere, you eat what's at the table, and it's a whole different adventure than when kids are allowed to be picky, and then they kind of craft that as their style. Yeah. And then we end up with really picky eaters.
Most definitely. And looking back to that point in time, are there foods that kind of created nostalgia in you that you wish you could go back to?
Like scrapple would be one of them.
Yeah.
We always made homemade scrapple, so, and I still do, but that's definitely something that really sticks out. The other one would be like chicken and dumplings. Mm-hmm. My mom made a really, really great chicken and dumplings.
Awesome.
And, just things like that. But food really is one of those things that draws my attention in, and my taste buds remember the ones that I really love.
Yeah, for sure. And now you mentioned moms. Who would you say kind of became your culinary influence? I mean, you're not necessarily traditionally in the culinary field, but I mean, doing salmon, clearly you looked at food as something more. So who do you think it was that kind of pointed you in that direction?
I actually think it went back to my grandmother on my dad's side, who was Hungarian, and everything was about food and feeding people. Like, it didn't matter if she had any money or not. The whole idea was, if you came to her house, she was going to make sure you had everything you wanted to eat, and it was always good. And I think that followed into my parents, and they kind of carried that same tradition. And food is definitely valued for its taste and quality.
Yeah, right on. So, I mean, you were surrounded by it then, whereas I think too often it's really easy for us to view food almost as a convenience. You, from an early age, clearly were surrounded by it having more significance than that.
Yes, and I think I realized that when I got to college and I actually had to go to a grocery store for the first time and like look at buying a chicken or a pork chop, and I was like just so taken back by what was there. Not even the cost, just the quality and the variety that people had to choose from, and I'm like, wow, how spoiled have I been?
Right. Oh yeah, for sure. So, you go to college, you're realizing this. When was it, Steve, that food, specifically in this case, salmon, became like your path? It was no longer just a thing that you do. It's something more. It's something you wanted to put your life to. Do you remember when that was?
It would have definitely been after I had fished for a couple years, probably in about 2003, 2004, once we had, because when we went to fish, commercial fish for salmon, it was more about the adventure and really didn't know anything about the quality of the fish and how great it was for you and how just fantastic of a species it is. And so it took a couple years of fishing, and then we started to sell some salmon as we brought it back for our family. And at that point, when we started to realize what other people were thinking of it and how good it was, and the conversation started to happen, and you were going to farmers markets selling and starting to talk to all these different vendors that were doing the same thing, which is different products, at that point is when it really hit home. My wife Jen and I really hit home that food is the basis for your life, and it's just so important that you're putting good food in your body. And then you start to look at all the different products there are in the real food world, and that's when salmon just really jumped out and just stood out and became my passion.
That's awesome. Yeah, I actually just had an oyster farmer on a couple episodes ago, very similar like lightning rod that hit him, that it wasn't just food as existence, it was food as, life in general, which is awesome. It's just awesome to hear. So you decide to make this your thing. You decide to run with this. And I for one, am glad you did, because the salmon that we got the other week was phenomenal. I mean, to die for. What would you say to date? I mean, obviously, fishing, that's what you do. Was there a business move that you made at one point that just like defined you, like your greatest success to date?
No, I think it was a slow uphill battle of just making it happen and carving out a living, that eventually 7 to 10 years into it morphed into something that was like, you're just like, wow, we've been doing all this hard work, we've been living all this product, and wow, we have this little business with 8 people working full time. And at that point, it was like, we weren't really looking at we never had a business plan. We never were like, hey, we're doing this to make a lot of money. We're just happy to be fishing, selling it to our friends and family and new friends and customers, and through that kind of a mindset. And then at one point it was like, wow, we've got this building on Route 11 and we've got 10 people working. And that was, I think that's more of how it came about versus, kind of looking at it on the front end and being like, well, if I do this, I can start a business.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure, like, the lay person, the average person, thinks fishing is, put line in water, pull out fish, repeat. but I'm certain after just receiving my education on oyster farming, which blew my mind completely, I'm sure there's a lot more to the process than that. Can you enlighten us as to what a typical trip for your crew entails?
Oh yeah, definitely. So we pretty much head to Alaska, to Bristol Bay, which is the southeast corner of the Bering Sea, about the first week of June. There's about a week's worth of preparation work to get the boat ready, to make everything is ready to go. Nothing's going to break. And then you're also waiting for the fish to show up. And as they start to show up, the biologists start to monitor how many's coming in. They start to give you open periods of like 8 or 10 hours that you're allowed to fish. And you start to fish, and you work your gear and boats to make sure that all the kinks are out of them. And the production isn't that great in the early part. And then the season builds, and every day more fish keep showing up as you get closer to the peak. So once that starts happening, then you're on the water for about 30 days where we don't come off at all, and we're just 4 guys living in a 32-foot boat, pretty bare bones living conditions, and the biologist will give us a 8 or 10 hour period. Like I said, you fish for that period of time, and then you drive back towards the river where the tenders, the larger commercial boats are parked, and as you drive in there, kind of make dinner or lunch or whatever time of day it is, offload our fish, clean the boat, and then lay down for an hour or 2 nap, and then get back up, go out, look for fish an 8 or 10 hour window, and then that cycle just repeats itself for about 20 days out of the 30 days, and just is really a busy time.
Wow. I mean, and like I said, just like with the oyster farming, to get my head around that is just insane. And to do that for that long a period, and then to love it, and then to want to make a business out of it, that's remarkable, man.
It definitely takes, you have to love fishing the outdoors, because really you're just living by the fish, the tides, the wind, the weather, everything just plays a big part of it. It's just a giant camping trip with a lot of hard work involved, and it's really fun, and that's what I like. I also love to see the salmon return. Like this year we had just over 50 million fish return to Bristol Bay, and if you want to talk about seeing a phenomenon like that happen, it's just mind-boggling, and it's awesome to see how powerful those fish are. You know, everybody knows how nutritious salmon is, but really what makes them that nutritious, and it really comes from that they are on their migration to spawn and die. They have built up all this fat and oils so that way they can quit eating once they hit the rivers. Once they hit fresh water, their mouths swell shut a little bit, and they just quit eating. So they live off their body for the next 30, 40 days until they wither away to nothing and die. And to see something that driven to spawn and die is really quite a sight.
I'm not going to lie, man. I can't be bothered to make my kids breakfast some morning, let alone spawn and die. That's commitment right there.
Yeah.
That's commitment. So this whole thing is way more of a process, of a concept than I think anybody listening could have possibly imagined, unless they're a salmon fisherman themselves. There's got to be like trends and things that are popular with regards to seafood, specifically salmon and salmon fishing. Is there a next big thing coming in seafood that we as consumers should be looking for?
I don't think there's anything next big thing. I think it's just more of focusing on wild and clean seafood. That's where, to me, the trend is going for real foodies or people that are really engaged in top quality food.
Right, definitely. And so I would know the answer to this because that's exactly what we look for. But explain to folks who might not be of that mindset, why is wild so important? Like, what is it? What is the difference that brings to the table?
Well, at this point in time, if you're comparing wild, you're always comparing it to farm raised, and the wild take a salmon, a sockeye, for example. He spends 1 to 2 years in the rivers eating larvae and minnows and all kinds of nutritional small insects. Then he goes to the ocean for 2 to 3 years, crustaceans and all kinds of larvae that's heavy in beta carotene, and they're just super nutrient dense. And then you compare that to a farm raised fish that's fed a diet that has grains in it, fish meal, and it's just not the same. They're in a pen. They're typically treated with antibiotics to keep disease down. In places where sea lice is high, they're sprayed with a pesticide to keep the sea lice off. And so you can start to see there's a huge. They're not even though they're both called salmon, they're not even the same. They're not even comparable.
Sure, definitely, and that's folks listening. This is not the first time the concept of fresh, clean, wild, even farm to table has come up, and that's one of the greatest explanations I've heard on it. You're getting almost 2 different types of food. You're getting 2 different species almost by the end of it.
Right, and we could circle this right back to the very beginning of the conversation of growing up butchering and having pigs that were harvested right on the farm, and really small scale, quality fed animals versus going to the supermarket and buying something that's high production and it's got no taste, no quality. So it's really the same concept.
Look at Steve with the comeback. That's it. You're hired, man. You want to be on the show full time? That's terrific. So talk to me about what's next for Wild for Salmon. You have your building on Route 11 here in Bloom. wildforsalmon.com. Anybody interested? Anybody want to stop by? Give them a call. 570-3870-550. But what's next? What's beyond that? I mean, I know you were saying earlier, you kind of just realized all of a sudden, hey, we've got 8 people working for us. We've got a building. What do you think the next thing's going to be?
That's a good question. I think we're getting to a point where we're trying to stabilize out. One of the interesting things with food and wild products or, on-farm raised is there's always a carrying capacity. And, Bristol Bay can only produce so much fish. So I think for us, at least in the near future, will be just to better serve our customers in any way we can, and add a few more products that have the same type of value that our sockeye salmon does or any of our wild seafood does, and just kind of continue to grow organically.
Grow where you're at. I like it. Grow organically. I like it. So now to the afters. That's where you're at. That's where you're going. All sounds amazing. I'm sticking around in Bloom, so I'm hoping you folks do the same. So the after section, some questions a little bit more out there, but and I'll certainly augment them for the fisherman. I'm standing on your boat. What music would I hear?
The waves. Well, first you'd hear the sound of the 730 horse man diesel engine. And then after that, it would be wind and water slapping against the hull.
Wind and water. Your own symphony.
Yes,
we're not
a music fan. There's definitely boats that are jamming out to all kinds of crazy stuff. But, my crew and one of my main deckhands spends the rest of his time in Alaska guiding hunting trips, and most of us are all outdoorsy. We do a lot of sport fishing while we're up there when time allows. So we really want to be bird watching, seeing what ducks are coming by. There's just a ton of beautiful things to be seen while you're there in Alaska. So for me to spoil it with the radio, that's not going to happen.
I like it. I like it a lot, actually. So you're going to be stranded on a deserted island. This is almost unfair for somebody who's a sport fisher and a hunter for fun, but go with me here. You're going to be stranded on a deserted island. You can only take 3 foods or food-type items with you. What would they be and why?
I would take as much dried smoked salmon as I possibly could, because I could eat it every day without getting tired of it, and it's super nutrition. Jeez, you're stumping me here.
Yeah.
So three products and 3 food type. What was that? 3?
Three foods or food type items. Be they, support staff, anything like that?
So would that work as a net?
I knew that was coming. So
So I take my supply of salmon to get started, a net, so I could craft up some commercial fishing or subsistence fishing. And what else would I take on an island? A sunshade.
Nice. Smart,
the sun
man.
just chars your ears when you're out on it all the time.
Spoken like a true fisherman. I love it. I love it. So Melanie Denea is an author, and she wrote My Last Supper. I don't know if you've ever seen the book.
I have not seen that book.
It's 50, and she actually did a follow-up to it, the next course. It's 50 very notable chefs, food figures, and they're all posed the same question. And that's actually where I got the inspiration for the show from, just the standard interview format. And it all centers around, you're checking out tomorrow, what's your last meal today? So I ask you, Steve, you're checking out tomorrow, what is your last supper?
My last supper is going to be a fillet of sockeye salmon on the grill, a little bit of olive oil, crushed garlic, some basil leaves, and then a nice big fresh ripe tomato sliced and just laid right down that side of that fish, put on the grill. 10 minutes later, taken off medium rare. I'm ready to check out.
Man, I get a feeling you've thought about that question before. I don't know. Very nice. Very nice. And finally, the simplest question, and yet it can be the most complex. What is food to you in a single word?
Subsistence.
Love it. Love it. Wish I could spell. I just tried to write it 3 times and it didn't work. But yeah, subsistence. Definitely. Well, Steve, thanks again, man. I really appreciate it. That actually brings us to the end of the interview. Appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with me. WildForSalmon.com, 570-387-0550. You're getting into your busy season, is that correct?
That is correct. We just got back here in late August. We've got all of our product in stock, and customers are stopping in, picking up, and enjoying the fresh salmon.
People, you need to get there to see it. I admittedly, that time that I came out to get the sockeye was actually the first time I was in your physical store. I picked up from Forks Farm Market before, but I had never seen the store, and it's brilliant. It's gorgeous. It's awesome. If you have any questions, they have a great web form that you can fill out, get you their information, info@wildforsalmon.com, or again, you can give them a call, 570-387-0550. They're located at 521 Montour Boulevard, that's Route 11 for those of you local, right here in dear old Bloomsburg. So, again, Steve Kurian, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. Good luck on your hunting trip, man.
Hey, thanks, Shawn. I appreciate it.
You got it, man.
More subsistence meat.
Yeah, that's right. More subsistence. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode number 43 of the Coarse Grind Podcast. My producer, as always, is the voluptuous Johnny Leland Robinson, a.k.a. the Reverend Johnny Lamoria. Be sure to check out his podcast, Cinematic Pig's Feet, and so many other projects he's got in the fire as we speak. Next episode is going to be number 44. Stay tuned. It's going to be good.